sweetest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever seen, everything I've ever won, everything I've ever dreamed has brought me here to the present moment, here to a new beginning, here, and I'm seeing life so clearly now. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the sweetest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. 'Cause here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Here I go, deeper, deeper, deeper than I've ever been before. Here I go, closer, closer, closer to my sacred source. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in. Get ready, my soul. I'm diving in to the deepest kind of love, to the sweetest kind of life. Get ready, my soul. Get ready, my soul.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
As an affirmation for peace in the Middle East and in solidarity with our Muslim and Jewish brothers and sisters, all of us, people of the book, we greet one another. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Peace be upon you.
And upon you peace.
Shalom alaikum.
Alaikum shalom.
So I'm Reverend Vicky Elder, and it's my joy and honor to welcome you to Unity of Monterey Bay, a beloved spiritual community co-created with love and intention. So whether you're here with us in person or joining us virtually, we know that love knows no boundaries, and we are one in spirit. And we affirm together, thank you, God, for this most amazing day. Miracle follows miracle, and wonders never cease. Unity of Monterey Bay is an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on the planet. We celebrate our oneness and honor the God of each of our understanding, affirming the innate good and divine essence within each and every individual. Will you please join me in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. And now let's take this intention deeper in a moment of prayer. I'm sharing from Out of the Flames by Sarah Eileen Lawal. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage and of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise, and so it is. Amen and amen. And so as we do every week, we're going to take a moment now and bless our kids. So inviting all the kids that are here to come on up, and anybody whose inner child is feeling like you need a blessing, you're always welcome to come up and join us as well. I know we have a few kids back there. Hey, Walter always brings somebody up with him. He recruits. Okay.
Bringing her doll.
Right. Hey, come on. You can come on up.
Wait,
there you go. There you go. Here, why don't you come over here so people can see you? Behind all these big adults, you get lost. Hi.
So we just wanted to share with everyone today that we are starting a new curriculum. It's a Unity curriculum based on the Harry Potter series, and we kicked it off on Friday night with a movie and pizza and popcorn night. We had a big time. So if you know children that you think might be interested in attending our church, you can let them know that we started this new... You have to stay up here, young man. You aged out a little while ago. So what Nicole is going to be giving them today is like a cool little letter inviting them to the Lumendorf School, where they're going to learn all kinds of cool things. And I think they have like a little owl in there that they get to color. So it's just an invitation to this new program. So again, if you know anyone, let them know that we have this going on. We are trying to reinvigorate our children's program, and Nicole has been doing an awesome job this entire time during the pandemic.
Let's
keeping
give it up
this whole
for
thing
Nicole.
going.
Yay!
So after we bless you, before you head out, take one of the envelopes, okay?
All right, so
And
we
you
allow
too.
these bright lights to awaken that place in us of awe and wonder and possibility. So will you join me in our blessing? We love you. We bless you. We appreciate you just the way you are.
This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
So now we again center ourselves and deepen our blissful inner connection with Spirit, taking a deep breath in and letting it out with an audible sigh. We allow all distractions to gently fade away as we invite the chime to call us into the sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and to remind us of our interconnection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, We follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being. And with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into the divine flow. And again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine, as we experience a transforming wave of gratitude. And with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all, embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say, thank you, God. So now fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from today's daily word, shared with permission of Unity, publisher of Daily Word, that can also be found at dailyword.com. And the word is journey. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. My life's journey begins and ends in the heart of God. I feel excitement at the beginning of a journey, thinking about the adventures, the beautiful sights, and the fascinating people I will find at my journey's end. Even as I look forward to reaching my destination, however, I remain alert, open to the adventures and insights that await discovery along the way. My faith tells me that my spiritual journey began in the heart of God, long before my human birth. In childhood, I looked outward, longing for adventures that would become waypoints on my journey to maturity. Now I journey forward, longing for the spiritual home I never really left. I am learning that even the most ordinary day can become an opportunity to realize that the heart of God is present everywhere. And from the scriptures, the Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Psalms chapter 121, verse 8. In witness to the wisdom of the many paths to the sacred, We read from 3 sacred traditions on this morning's topic, courage. From Taoism, from caring comes courage. From Buddhism, the only way to ease our fear and be truly happy is to acknowledge our fear and look deeply at its source. Instead of trying to escape from our fear, we can invite it up to our awareness and look at it clearly and deeply. And from Christianity, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. John chapter 14, verse 27.
What would I do if I knew that I could not fail? If I believed with the wind always fill up my sail? How far could I go? What would I achieve? Trusting the hero in me. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where fools and dreamers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step would I take today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What if we're all meant to do what we secretly dream? What would you do if you knew you could have anything? Like the mighty oak sleeps in the heart of the seed, are there miracles in you and me? If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where fools and dreamers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step would I take today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? What would I do today if I were brave? If I refuse to listen to the voice of fear, with the voice of courage whisper in my ear. If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where fools and dreamers dare to tread. I'd never lose faith, even when losing my way. What step would I take today if I were brave? What will I do today now that I'm brave? What will I do today now that I'm brave? What will I do today now that I'm brave? What will I do today now that I'm brave?
So today's lesson, The Courage to Unforget, was first inspired by an article from the book The Courage Habit by Kate Swoboda. described in one endorsement as a combination of the latest research into what creates genuine change with the spiritual view that fear is a gateway to fearlessness. This topic became enhanced when I read the opening editorial, Unforgetting, in the summer edition of the Fourth R, which is a religious literacy journal written by Art Dewey, professor of theology at Xavier University in Cincinnati and co-founder of the Healing Deadly Memories program. Dewey's message provided a perfect and timely context to a lesson on developing courage, especially as we enter and co-create this new normal. Dewey's message about unforgetting tapped right into my subconscious concerns about forgetting the meaningful and seemingly hopefully transformative lessons of this past year and a half. He said, as we move into what some would call a return to normal, by celebrating with barbecues and families released from lockdown, I wonder if we are beginning again to do what is so American, rushing back to get back where we were. Despite urgings not to forget, Americans historically have displayed a marked capacity to consign the past to oblivion. He makes a relevant reference to how quickly Americans moved past Lincoln's Gettysburg admonition to remember those courageous soldiers who held the line at a staggering cost, moving quickly into Reconstruction and then the Jim Crow era that effectively whitewashed all those memories and sacrifices. And he also notes that similarly American attitudes towards death itself being dispatched, like our elderly, to somewhere out of sight. But then came COVID, and a gradual realization that things were no longer normal, with the uncertainty of the situation compounded by the helplessness felt on every side. For me, it was a cogent reminder of our oneness, that our whole nation, indeed our whole world, were in this together, and emphasized our undeniable interconnection and interdependence, not only with one another and other people, but with the biosphere that we call our home, Earth. But it also shone a bright light on our disconnections, like the institutionalized income inequality in our nation and our world that leaves so many without even the basics, let alone human dignity, alongside a reality check about who actually does the essential work in our society. And then things got worse. As the nation collectively viewed those 9.5 minutes of George Floyd being held on the ground by the knee of a police officer on his neck, Dewey reflects something deep within so many began to thaw, and people of all sorts streamed out to protest in the streets. Blacks and whites together masked up and stood in solidarity to declare that Black Lives Matter, that the suffocating cries of George Floyd had been heard. We all, I'm sure, remember last summer and the awakening that it triggered, including many of us realizing and acknowledging our previously unconscious white privilege, and with it, the institutionalized racial inequity that remains to be faced and redressed in our nation. But then things got even worse. The Capitol was stormed, described by Dewey as the dogs of disillusion cried havoc and left their mark on congressional walls and windows, and I would add, on our nation's soul. Now, 6 months later, our country and our democracy are still lurching back and forth in a bedlam of punditry and political plays, with a number of congressional representatives, despite having witnessed what happened that day, now denying their own experiences, their own words, and extensive video evidence to suggest the records show that nothing untoward happened on January 6th. And here's the rub. Dewey proposes that what appears to be a complete revision of this unexpected epoch is not an unusual move by Americans. For over 400 years, so many of us have remained blithely unaware of our nation's original sin. It's taken an epidemic to get us to admit not only our fragility, but the reality of what is lacking in our country. Dewey admits this rush into forgetfulness may not be exclusively American. noting the Greeks had a word for it, lethe, which means both forgetting and oblivion. But he concludes asking this question: could it be that our usual way of living, our normal way of life, rides on the crest of forgetfulness? Isn't life more pleasant when we gloss over inconvenient elements? But at what cost comes this more pleasant life? I don't know about you, but I am definitely feeling the pull of back to normal and the temptation of forgetfulness. These past few months, ever since being vaccinated and having the data continually affirmed that supports how effective vaccinations are, I've definitely reclaimed a new normal that looks a lot like my old normal. Spending unmasked time with my new granddaughter, flying back to Cincinnati in the spring, going to Giants baseball games, and basking in the family gatherings created with my son's wedding at the beginning of this month. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we should forego our own joy, that we shouldn't step back in and reclaim life and all of its fullness and all of its connections. But I do have to pause and wonder if in my basking, I'm forgetting the important lessons of this past year, along with my strength and conviction to do something about the economic, racial, and other inequities institutionally endemic in our society, laid bare by the pandemic as well as the frontal assault on our democracy. Which brings me back to the courage habit and my realization about how the relationship between human forgetting and oblivion pattern the fear that so often sabotages our best intentions and desires, being it wanting to make a career change, to tell someone that we love them, or to speak up for and actively defend what's right when we see an injustice. Kate Swoboda, author of The Courage Habit, describes it as that voice within that pipes up saying, there's no point, or we're not really capable of creating the life or world we desire anyway. Or I would add, it's just easier to slip back into my comfort zone. Whether we call it fear or anxiety, stress, discomfort, or life changes, the cycle too often plays out in the same way. We have a desire for change, but our fear of what might happen or not happen, or the belief that we are somehow not enough to make a difference, can keep us stuck. I particularly like Swoboda's approach to fear. She argues that when it comes to dealing with fear, we often go about it all wrong. Instead of seeing fear as bad and trying to get rid of it when it arises, we can choose to accept fear as part of the process of change and practice courage instead. This aligns with our unity understanding about what we resist persists and the importance of expanding our self-awareness, which makes us more aware of our habitual programming and thus more able to change it. Swoboda explains that habits are more than actions like brushing our teeth or exercising. They also consist of behavioral responses to our different emotions. We have thought pattern habits that tend to run our lives. For example, for many people, fear-based responses are the natural, habitual response to adversity because our brains tend to seek the fastest, most efficient way to relieve stress when we feel it, which means we rely on solutions that have provided short-term stress release in the past, like procrastinating in response to feelings of self-doubt, or putting perfectionism into overdrive, which eventually ends up sabotaging us through burnout, or returning to what's comfortable and or pleasant by forgetting and or glossing over inconvenient elements. The thing is, our brains like predictability, and they're primed to reward us for choosing familiar responses and routines. So when we ditch the plan to go after our dreams and instead choose what's known and therefore safe, in essence, when we choose our comfort zone, we're rewarded as our brain relaxes and releases endorphins and things that make us feel good for a moment. But safe and comfortable are not the stuff of growth and transformation or social change and justice. In fact, our fear of change and corresponding comfort in the known is often what keeps us stuck in dysfunctional, even abusive relationships, dissatisfying jobs, and negative thought cycles. So how do we break these chains of fear? Drawing on her research about habit formation and stress reduction, as well as working with numerous clients facing fear, Swoboda has developed 4 useful strategies for overcoming fear or overcoming the fear of change by developing a healthy courage habit. Her first strategy is access the body. None of these are really new to us, but they're always good reminders, especially when we're in the midst of what's the next step. Fear shows up in our bodies. For example, as sweaty palms, a queasy stomach, tightness in our chest, a vague sense of discomfort or unease, etc. Think for a moment about what your own signals are. Mine are definitely stomach-related. Becoming aware of our body's reactions and sensations allows us to recognize their emotional responses so we can consciously listen and work with them rather than unconsciously be run by them. Swoboda suggests using focused breathing or body scans, both practices associated with mindful meditation that Michelle is so aptly continues to remind us of and teach us throughout our seasons of her meditation boot camps. As we do that, it can help us tune into our body's sensations without trying to change them or judge them, which is really key. We don't listen to judge. We don't turn our lives back over to that critical voice inside of us. Rather, we just listen. In this way, we can access our fear without rejecting it or being pulled into an old fear routine. That leaves us freer to better identify the source of the fear and make conscious choices. Meditation practices are all about pausing. Because in the pause, when we stop that brain chatter, we stop that habitual pattern, we get to choose again. She adds, if mindfulness practices aren't your thing, you can also try dancing, running, yoga, stretching, or hiking. Just increasing your enjoyment and acceptance of your body can help you listen to it when it's telling you that something's wrong. The second strategy is listen without attachment. It's one of the easiest things to say and the hardest things to do. Often when we find ourselves stuck in fear, we're hearing that inner critic feeding us a constant stream of misinformation about our abilities and telling us that we're doomed to fail, or that it's just too hard to even attempt, or we're only one person, so what can we do? We may not even be consciously aware of that voice. Or even when we are aware of it, we often try to ignore it or appease it by determining that we'll do better or telling it to just shut up and leave us alone. Such strategies can often offer temporary relief, but they don't actually silence the critic. Swoboda suggests a more effective response is to reframe the voice as part of ourselves that's trying to get our attention, sort of like an unhappy child that's just screaming, and the screaming is annoying, but there's something underneath it, so that we can learn to listen. Because there's always a message underlying that criticism, perhaps insecurity, perhaps fear, perhaps frustration, memories of pains or wounds coming up. When we can listen to our inner critic without attachment, in essence, without the need to ignore it or to accept what it's saying, it can reveal amazing insights into our early programming. And again, awareness is the first step to change. As long as these patterns stay unconscious, they just run our lives. When we take the time and use the skills and tools to bring them into our consciousness, we have an opportunity to change and grow. The third strategy, Swoboda suggests, is reframe limiting stories. As humans, we know we make meaning out of our experiences by telling stories to ourselves about how the world operates. And as our third unity principle explains, our stories become our reality and have everything to do with how we see ourselves and see the world. In essence, our stories become our personal lens on life. coloring our experiences like designer sunglasses that filter everything through our beliefs and expectations. The thing is, some stories are more helpful than others. Determining things like whether we believe people are inherently good or evil, and whether the world is trustworthy or threatening, whether we approach life as a victim or a survivor, whether we view new experiences as dangerous or opportunities, whether we believe we have the capacity to develop more courage or essentially just not that brave. How many of us sometimes say, that's just who I am, without recognizing that who I am is who I've created myself to be? Some of our stories have been useful or even essential to our survival in childhood when we created them, but then they become limiting and dysfunctional for us as adults. Fortunately, once we understand that we create our stories that define us and our lives, we can begin to ask ourselves that question I think Dr. Phil became famous for. How's that working for you? Or how's that working for me? And then we can reframe or rewrite these limiting stories through various practices like consciously adopting a defining spiritual story, lens, or truth. For example, our 5 unity principles. It's why we work so hard at training our brains to believe these truths, because then there's something within us that experiences can bounce off against and that bring up those contrary ideas. How many of you, when you first came into Unity and were learning these principles, everything was working so great for a while, then all of a sudden you hit a wall. And all of a sudden, these beliefs get challenged by experience after experience. And that's where the deep work begins. It brings up those fears and those wounds and those things that are buried deep within us, so we have a chance to look at them in the light and say, oh, I see how come I started being afraid of that because of this experience or that, but what I know to be true is there's only one presence, and I'm a child of God. We can also use a daily mindful meditation practice, which can help us develop our capacity, again, to notice and pause. We can use the daily practice of affirmations and denials, like reading the daily word every day or keeping a gratitude journal. All of those daily practices begin reprogramming our brains. And again, they don't always just automatically erase what's been there before, but it definitely causes it to come up to the surface so that we can see the conflict and deal with the questions in a conscious sort of way. We can also take classes that enhance self-awareness, classes we've offered here like the Enneagram or emotional maturity or spiritual maturity, or we can work with a coach or a therapist that can help us better understand the origins of our existing scripts and those critical voices so many of us sometimes become slaves to. And in all that, we can begin to reframe or rewrite our stories into more positive, more useful, and more supportive examples for our lives. It's really important not to confuse reframing with spiritual bypassing. That's a concept that's becoming more and more into our awareness as people adopt positive attitudes and such to affect their lives. But spiritual bypassing actually attempts to evade or sidestep very real challenges in the world with Pollyannish denial and avoidance. Whereas effective reframing is not simply about adopting a positive or optimistic spin on things, but rather it involves emotion regulation, tuning into our emotions to see what beliefs they're connected to, and being able to stop that repetitive cycle that emotions can get going in our heads. How many of you ever have a little voice and it just keeps repeating and repeating, and you need to figure out, how do I stop that? Well, the more aware we become, the more we have the capacity to stop and pause and then choose again. Swoboda notes that reframes need not be wildly optimistic. In fact, they're usually better when they're not. For example, instead of saying, I can't, we might practice saying, I'm at least willing to try. Or instead of reacting with, this is too overwhelming, we can learn to pause and say, I can take a deep breath, slow down, I'm going to take this one step at a time. I also like using hooks like up until now. It's something that helped me begin to reframe habitual negative comments or things that I would say that would just come up in my mind, like, I always get this wrong. And then I add up until now. It's just the consciousness. So once that habitual statement comes out, it's a way to counter it. It's sort of like saying, no, that doesn't control me up until now. Reframing or replacing our limited error stories with stories that open us to new possibilities can create noticeable changes in our lives, including a sense of agency and capability, as well as more positive emotions and optimism, which lead to greater resilience and growth. I believe it's why when people come into Unity, they really talk about it changes our lives. Unity principles changed my life, and I watched it in my kids. I watched it in people that come into our community, because it isn't just a lesson about something that happened 2,000 years ago and then you go back out in the world. The gift the filmers gave us is practical Christianity, practical spirituality, principles that we can put into our everyday living that actually change our lives. Finally, Swoboda's fourth strategy is create community. To truly live courageous lives, it helps to have like-minded people around us who are also trying to honor the values of courage. Creating courageous communities, like our own Unity of Monterey Bay, gives us the support we need to face our challenges. When our stories get in our way, we need people who are doing similar work to help us see where we're stuck and what we're truly capable of. Charles Duhigg, author of The Power of Habit, writes, "For most people who overhaul their lives, there are no seminal moments or life-altering disasters. There are simply communities, sometimes just one other person, who make change believable." In short, surrounding ourselves with like-minded people who share similar courageous values such as kindness, vulnerability, optimism, and empathy in a world that doesn't seem to value those things helps buffer us against the stress of taking a risk, of going against what seems like it's not the flow, but it's the drift of mass consciousness. And it supports us in going for the big changes that make a real difference in our lives. I know I experienced the power of Unity's teachings and the power of community support, especially here at Unity of Monterey Bay, where I consistently teach what I most need to learn, and whether it's a reminder to look for the blessings or the camaraderie support to stay engaged in the long-haul, slow change efforts of COPA, the support is always here. Making change, including staying a course that may be difficult, is simply easier when we have one another. And as Dewey concluded in his editorial on Unforgetting, we need one another to remember. The Greeks called this refusal to forget truth, aletheia, which appears in the act of unforgetting and denying oblivion or spiritual bypassing, which brings a whole new meaning to Jesus' word, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Bottom line, the more we interrupt our old fear-based habits and replace fear-based responses with responses that boost our courage, the more we reinforce our courage habit. And living our lives with courage will help us build the capacity to unforget, so that we can face and redress the issues that keep us stuck, whether they're individual or collective issues. It stops us from repeating the past and instead creating a new future, whether that's embarking on a new job, engaging in the difficult work of healing or improving a relationship, or working to change the world. Namaste.
above me, God below me, all around and inside, all around and inside, all around and inside.
We've come to that wonderful time in our service where we have an opportunity to spend some time in quiet meditation and contemplation and take this lesson deep into our souls. So I invite you to just get comfortable. Begin to bring your awareness to your breath. Allow yourself to feel your body just as it is in this present moment. Feel the places where you're resting on the pew. Feel that support beneath you. Begin to slow down your breathing so that you're taking some slow, deep breaths in and exhaling slowly, feeling that release and that letting go. Taking another deep breath in, getting that wonderful fresh oxygen to every cell of your body, and then exhaling and releasing and letting go. Allow yourself to sink just a little deeper now into the surface beneath you, relaxing your body as you continue to breathe deeply and slowly. And now begin to become aware of the presence that is here, that we experience when we slow down and stop for a few moments. This loving presence of God. That is always just a breath away. So now I invite you to call to your mind the words from the song that Denise sang that said, "What would I do today if I were brave?" And ask yourself, what would I do today if I were brave? Just allow those answers to gently come. Could be something big or something small. We all have that thing that we want to do, but that maybe we're afraid to step into. And so just allow, if there are feelings of fear, allow them to be present. Feel where they are in your body. And just as Vicky shared, rather than push them away or shut them down, just allow them to be there. Notice what inner dialogue comes up around the fear. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Rather than turn away from the fear, look deeply at the fear. Allow it to inform you. Allow it to point you to where you need to work. Courage is not the absence of fear. We all have fear. We develop courage when we know that in spite of the fear, we hold to the spiritual principles that we know to be true. There is one God, one power, one presence, God the good. We, as children of God, are made in that image and likeness. And when we are aligned with that, when we are living from that truth, when we take time to know the presence of God, we can act even in the face of fear. The Bible tells us so many times over and over, do not be afraid. It might be saying, be afraid, but do it anyway. Know that you are not alone, that God is with you in all things. So I invite you to just rest gently in this knowing of this presence and this power that is the truth of our lives and of our being for a few moments in the silence.
God before me, God behind me, to the left and the right. God above me, God below me, all around and inside. God before me, God behind me, to the left and the right. God above me, God below me, all around and inside. All around and inside. All around and inside.
So as we begin to bring this time to a close now, we do so grateful for this reminder of our truth and grateful for this community which helps us to remember that truth and calls us back again and again. And grateful for this presence of God, which we know is always available to us at any time. And so we say, thank you, God.
Thank you,
so
God.
it is. Amen.
Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, treasure, and talent in order to sustain this spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation and abundance in joyous generosity. We transform all appearance of fear or lack into a faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. And with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, and that we have enough, and that there always is enough to both have and to share. And again, we are grateful to all of you for your online giving through our website at unityofmontereybay.org and through your mailed-in offerings, including those who have set up automatic giving with your banking institutions. We are truly blessed. For those of you here in person, to honor the COVID protocols, we will not be passing the baskets, but they will be at the back of the sanctuary and by the door for you to drop your offering in as you leave this morning. And while you're socializing, if you so wish to push a little blessing as you walk by the basket, please feel free. Bless that abundance. And now, from this place of faith and gratitude, I invite you to join me in mindful intention and joining in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good, divine love flowing through me, blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God.